You're listening to The Mountain Spirit, a podcast of Christian Appalachian Project, where we explore the stories, voices, and changemakers shaping Appalachia. Our guest today is Cathy Rigg, an Appalachian author whose roots in the mountains of Southwest Virginia stretch back 7 generations. Cathy is a lifelong writer, artist, entrepreneur, and storyteller. Her debut novel, That Which Binds Us, is a powerful work of historical fiction set in the Appalachian Mountains during the Civil War. She explores lineage, faith, culture, and the ties that connect us across generations. This book was published when Cathy was 65, and it was named a 2025 Forward Indies Book of the Year finalist. She reminds us that it's never too late to answer a calling. Hi, Cathy. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tina, I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Well, we are excited to hear more about your work and how you got into writing. And so why don't we just start with that? We mentioned in the intro that you're a 7 generation strong Appalachian. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your family and some of that history of your family in Appalachia?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. I am a child of Southwest Virginia. I grew up in the town of Wise, which is in the southwest corner, just, a spit from Kentucky, as far as you can go in Virginia and still be in Virginia. And I grew up there in the 1960s and 1970s, which was just a wonderful time to be in those beautiful mountains. I had a very happy childhood. I still today am very close to many of my girlfriends from that time. In fact, one of my dearest friends and I were born in the Wise Hospital 3 days apart. So we have we've known each other since, the days that we were born. And one of the reasons that I bring that up and think that that's so significant is just because of the geography of that particular part of Appalachia. It was so remote even then that we really had a very insulated childhood. I think it's one of the things that made us, as a group of friends, we really were very close, and we've remained that way today. It is foundational to all of us, and it keeps our feet on the ground. So that was an important part of my growing up there. Also, we lived next door to my grandmother, and my grandmother has been, as for so many of us Appalachians, my grandmother has been a very, very strong influence on my life. She was in a wheelchair most of her adult life, and yet she stayed curious the entire time. She became a genealogist in her 70s. She learned to type. She learned to type in her 70s so that she could type her own manuscripts. She watched Saturday Night Live. I mean, she never hardly left her home, but she always stayed curious. And so I have been very influenced by her and by so many, I believe, by so many of the women in that line of my family that goes back in Wise County and Scott County for all that time. So I'm very, very, very proud to be a Southwest Virginian.
That's awesome. And you mentioned your grandmother. I know your website talks about like a calling and feeling that calling of your ancestors to even write. So can you talk about that sense of calling and what it feels like to carry those voices with you?
Yes, I should mention that I left home at 18 when I went away to college. I came to South Carolina for college, and I have more or less been here in these flatlands since then. But in 2013, my mom, who of course still lived in Wise, passed away. And my husband and I went home for her funeral. And as we were leaving, as we were coming back to South Carolina, I just had the strangest, most palpable feeling come over me that I've ever experienced. And I, out of the blue, turned to my husband and said, I am going to write a novel, and it is going to be a novel of these mountains. And, I certainly think, as I look back at that, I think back and I know that a part of it was probably just a grab for that place and for my home, with Mom now being gone. But even more than that, I can just feel that it is that maternal line of mine I think they were reaching to me, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, and all the way back those 7 generations. I think it was those women saying, it is time for you to do this, girl, and we want you to get to it. And I tell you, I have felt them every step of this journey. There have been the most incredible things that have happened that make me know that they have been walking alongside me every step of the way. And it's a joy, and it makes me emotional as well, of course. And I set about writing the novel as a result of that.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit, or actually a great bit, about your novel and some of the themes in it. But you mentioned your roots in Virginia, there in the Appalachian Mountains. How has that deep family history shaped the way you understand and approach storytelling, and what it means to call a place home?
Oh my gosh, what an incredible question. Um, I think a part of what it means to call a place home is just the pull that I felt in what I just described. I mean, it is certainly in Appalachia and in the Appalachian culture. I think a part of what defines us, and what I believe always has, is that just that call of the ancestors. I think there's just something in the land and in the spirit that reaches generation to generation to generation. And as a new grandmother myself, I feel it now. So I think that that's a part of it. And I do think, too, one of the things that we'll probably talk about related to the novel, but again, it's just Appalachia. It's just the land. The land and the land forms are something that really call to me. It's just a part of who I am. So, needless to say, that is a big part of the novel as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned that next generation in your granddaughter. Talk a little bit about that connection of this. You just talk about sort of the maternal line in your family, and now you're carrying on that through your granddaughter. So talk about that a little bit more.
Here's something that I didn't realize until I went on book tour, and I have been asked questions about this, and I actually looked at it. And for the last 5 generations in my family, we are only daughters of only daughters. And what I mean when I say that is, my great grandmother had one brother, but she's the only girl. She had my grandmother, who was an only child, the only girl, who had my mother, the only child, the only girl, who had me. I have 3 brothers, but I'm the only girl. I have one daughter, girl, obviously. She and her husband have Posey, who will be 2 tomorrow. She's a girl. So there's a pretty strong line there, it feels to me. And as I reach down to my daughter and my granddaughter and feel that joy multiplied, I can feel those who came before pulling to me. It's a pull that goes both ways, and I feel it both ways very strongly.
I love it. So you mentioned earlier when you're talking about your family and where you're from that you left the area to go for your school and for a career. But your writing eventually brought you back. And I think you talked about your mom and how that was inspiration to start your book. What is it about Appalachia in general for people that you think keeps calling them back home, even when they leave, but they're drawn back?
There's some sort of magic that mountains just don't let go. They just get into your bones and into your blood. And there's an important line in the novel where one of my characters says, "Once you come here, if you're born here or you've come here for a time, the mountains just won't. They just don't let you go." And I think it's all those things that we've already talked about. I think it's the generational pull that's so strong. I think it's the land that's so strong. I think it's certainly the cultural part. I think it's the values. I mean, it's all of those things. And I don't know. I feel it's pretty unique to Appalachia.
Yeah, we see that in particular with Christian Appalachian Project, folks who come to volunteer and then they just stay. They stay.
Yeah.
There's something that pulls them here and keeps them here. So let's talk a little bit about your book. You said the name of the book is That Which Binds Us. It explores lineage, loyalty, and values passed down across generations. Why did those particular themes feel especially important to you to explore in this particular novel?
I don't think that when I started writing this novel, I didn't set out with those themes being things that were of importance to me to write about. I just found a story that I wanted to tell, and as I wrote the novel, as I wrote the story, um, they very naturally became an inherent part. I mean, for all of the reasons that we've already talked about. Um, it's interesting as I think about it. Growing up, I certainly didn't know I was Appalachian
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s. There
Yeah.
wasn't television that told me that. There was not an internet, that told me
Yeah.
that. I didn't realize that until I was a grown up, and I learned more about, really of all the things. When I learned more about really the prejudices, I guess, against the culture and the people of Appalachia, that I became more aware of it. Interestingly, though, in the writing of the novel, I sat in that place and looked at all of those things anew. So the novel taught me so much about Appalachia that I had never been conscious of or aware of, including how significant those themes are to the people, of that area.
Yeah.
Above all, I believe it is a novel of place, and as we've said, that's a significant theme in the novel, as well as just, it is the placeholder of Appalachia, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So the novel brings together these characters from very different backgrounds, cultures, and religious traditions. What drew you to explore those tensions and intersections?
Um, I started the novel with the kernel of an idea. Of course, the novel is historical fiction, so I found a real person whose story I was interested in telling and exploring. Not somebody in my family. This did not end up being a novel of my family, but of somebody else who lived in Scott County, Virginia, actually in the 1860s. And I meant to tell his story. His name is Patrick Hagan. But as I learned more about him, I came across another real person named Elizabeth Young. And I decided, I felt inherently, this will be way more interesting told from her point of view. I liked that female voice for this novel. But when I got to chapter 2, a different character stepped forward and said, I want to tell my own story. And then a third character said, I want to tell my own story. And so as a result, you have 5 characters, each of whom is different. Some are very different. 3 are local people local to the area, but who have different educational levels and ages and that sort of thing. And then 2 are outsiders. So I was very interested as the novel and the characters started to tell me, in exploring how we as people of different backgrounds, different faiths, different economic statuses, how we can all be in the same situation. And of course, in this case, there's the extraordinary backdrop of the Civil War, and how we can impact and change each other, and how we ultimately find out that we have far more in common than separates us.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's always the case. We have those
Isn't
conversations.
it?
There's more things that connect us. You mentioned your grandmother learning to type in her 70s and becoming a genealogist, and her work maybe informed some of your research. So, what was it like to weave your family's documented history into a fictional narrative, or was that part of your background that informed your writing here?
I used her books extensively as I was doing all of this research. And in reality, I ended up using very little of it. But the part that I used is incredibly significant and an incredible story in and of itself. And there is a character in the novel whose name is Abijah Alley. He was a real person, a real man who lived in Scott County at that time. And I know that he was a real person because I found an article that profiled him in the New York Times in 1897. He had declared himself a prophet. He built a replica of King Solomon's temple out of logs in Scott County, Virginia. He did all kinds of other just incredibly crazy things, but he also created his own religion and created his own church in that place at that time. There are three religions that are represented primarily in the novel: Irish Catholic, which is the faith of a primary character who brought the Catholic Church to Southwest Virginia at that time; Primitive Baptist, which was the predominant religion in the area at the time; and then Abijah Alley's church. And I don't know anything about his specific faith. I couldn't find that in any of the records, but I got to create it as the author. So his character is really the God of forgiveness, the God of love, a celebratory worship. So it was sort of the third part of a three-legged stool as we, talk about the ways that we are all different and the way our paths cross. I found in my grandmother's genealogy book that he was invited to preach at the Primitive Baptist Church, which is something that it's kind of hard to believe, understanding a little bit about the Primitive Baptist faith of that time and having a guest preacher who would have been at Abijah Alley. But not only that, she gave me the scripture that he preached on. And the scripture that he preached on was, all about idols and fools. And so had I spent all my time looking through the Bible trying to find exactly the right thing for my character to preach on in the novel, it wouldn't have been better than that. So my grandmother handed me that beautiful gift.
That's amazing. Like from generation to generation in history, and now it comes to life in a novel that other people can also step into and be a part of as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
You can make this summer into a season of service and have a lifetime of impact on youth in Appalachia. Join us in the great outdoors by becoming a camp counselor at one of our 2 beautiful camps in Eastern Kentucky. Room and board, stipend, travel reimbursement, and educational award are available. Apply today at christianapp.org/volunteer. That is christianapp.org/volunteer.
So tell me a little bit. So we talked a little about it in the intro as well, that you published this book when you were 65. So that inspires us all to continue to dream dreams and chase dreams. What would you say to people who feel like they may have missed their window to pursue a dream from maybe their younger years?
Oh, the window never closes is the first thing that I would say. I feel like that we are all, when you are gifted a long life, there are so many lives that you can live during that beautiful span. And so I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to have a new career after a long, lovely career that, has been my life up to this point. But it's so wonderful to have an opportunity like this at the age. Well, it started at 65 when I was published. I'm a little older than that now, but you just know more now and you can appreciate it more. And I think there's a little more wisdom. So whatever it is that you are interested in, as my grandmother modeled for me, stay curious and, one thing about me is I'm not really afraid to fail. I will be bad at something in a skinny minute as long as I get to just try it out. So that was certainly applicable. And I think I'll just up and write a novel. Yeah, don't be afraid. Just take the first step.
Be brave. I love it. So tell me what made you choose the Civil War as your backdrop for a novel, for historical fiction?
Yeah, that's another just remarkable and interesting thing. I did not choose the Civil War, nor did I ever even have a thought of writing anything of the Civil War. It didn't interest me. I am certainly no expert. I just found this story that I was interested in telling, and as I started writing it, the truth is I went, it's 1860. I guess I'm not going to, I really had thoughts of, do you suppose I could just ignore the fact that it's the Civil War? Can I get, there's willing suspension of disbelief. Of course I could not. And as I started to study the Civil War, it became yet another gift to me in learning how the Civil War played out in our remote mountains. It is not the Civil War I had ever read of, and many people have told me the same. It is the way that the Civil War played out in Southwest Virginia and in the mountains of Southwest Virginia, because it was so remote. Really, the geography defined what it looked like and how it happened. And the real danger to people was deserters and scallywags and people with ill intent on their mind coming into our mountains to hide out and to take advantage of a population that at that time was also already very vulnerable. So just learning about the fact that it was such a different war in our mountains was a really interesting thing to learn about. And I, even as I think about this novel, I don't think of it as a Civil War novel. I think of it as it's a novel of ordinary people, and it's about them. It's just that the backdrop is this crazy time of the Civil War.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about stereotypes a little bit in a different way. The Appalachian region, and we've talked about this on the podcast with lots of guests from different perspectives, is often misunderstood and reduced to stereotypes. How does your work push back against those narratives? Not just this novel, but you are an artist, you go out to events and engage with the community. I'm sure you talk to your readers. So how does your life's work push back against those stereotypes?
I would honestly say that what I have learned the most and where I have learned the most has been being a part of the Appalachian writers community. I most years now go to the Appalachian Writers Workshop in Hindman, Kentucky, where there's just an incredibly brilliant and supportive community of writers from all around the region of Appalachia, many of whom are doing what I consider really important work in this area. They are truly trying to change the perception of Appalachia as it has historically been portrayed and demonstrate what a vibrant and diverse community we have as Appalachians. And I so admire that work. My work has not been as upfront as theirs has been, but what I have thought about and what I did think about as I started to write this novel is what I can do is through story provide something that I believe, or hope at least, I hope will be an honoring of our ancestors and of their way of life. And by hopefully giving people, particularly people outside of the region, a story that hopefully they can relate to and understand, then maybe that will go a little ways into changing some perceptions that have existed for a long, long time. I will say a great joy for me on book tour is, of course, I do get to talk to a lot of people who have read this novel, which always surprises me from outside the region. It's a surprise and a delight. And I'm happy, and I can feel my mother and my grandmother's joy every time somebody says to me, I didn't know anything about this part of Virginia. I didn't know anything about those mountains. I have such respect for the people that you portrayed in your novel, and that makes me very happy.
Amen. Cathy, you've also spent decades building a successful creative business before returning to fiction. So how did your professional life help shape you as a novelist?
Well, my career has been in marketing and advertising by and large, although at the heart of that, my work has always been writing. I went to Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina, majored in English, intended to be a journalist, came home to Wise and had an internship at the Coalfield Progress at our local newspaper there, which I absolutely loved. It was a wonderful job. I had great mentors at the Coalfield. And then I continued to write throughout my career, first as a copywriter, which I've continued to do for 40 years, but also as a brand strategist and a creative director. And the two things that I'll say about that career that have really been helpful from a novel writing standpoint are, number one, my work as a marketer is all about taking very complicated problems, other businesses and other people's problems that are very complicated, and breaking them down into their most raw parts to get to what's the real issue here, and then developing new ways of thinking about that or packaging it or changing it to get whatever outcome it is that a client is looking for. So that skill is very helpful. That critical thinking skill is very helpful, particularly when putting together the pieces of a novel. So that's a part of it. The other thing is, of course, it's been great to have a marketing background, because when you're a debut author and you're not with a big 5 publisher, there's a whole lot of marketing you do yourself. So. And I'm not afraid of somebody saying no. To me, no just means, okay, let's figure a different way. So my career has helped me with that.
I love it. You teed up my next 2 questions in your previous answer about folks you encounter who've read the book from the region and those outside of the region. So what do you hope readers from Appalachia feel when they see themselves or in the history reflected in your book?
First of all, I hope that when somebody who is from Appalachia reads this book, I hope that they feel a real connection with their ancestors, their people who came before. Yeah. I hope that it brings, I hope it brings that line that connects us to the forefront, and that there's a some recognition of how significant that is. So that's one thing. The second thing I think is voice is so important in all things. Voice is so important in all things, but certainly, certainly in the case of writing a novel, and a novel like this, voice is really important. And I wanted to make sure that I got the voice right. 3 of the primary characters are written in dialect, and in querying this novel with largely New York agents for many years, the feedback that I typically got was, I can't do this with the dialect. I need for you to either soften the dialect or lose it completely. And I had one in particular who said, I'm very interested, but I need for you to write it from a single character's point of view. And for all of those, my answer was always no. The dialect needs, it is the language and the music of the mountain people. Yeah. And I want it to be true and honest. I don't want to mess with that. And also, as I said, I think just there's a real chorus of voices, and that to me is the important part of this story. So making sure that I got the voices right mattered, and I hope that as people who are familiar with that language, that they read it and it feels and sounds real and true.
Yeah. So tell me, because then you mentioned that you do have people that are outside of Appalachia that have read the book and talked to you at events that you have. So how do they approach the dialect, and what do they take away from like getting a chance to be a part of this story of these 5 characters and walking away having been touched by that experience?
I haven't really had a lot of feedback about the dialect in particular from folks outside. I hope that signifies that they were able to read it well, and that it wasn't too difficult. What I get more often, which I also love, is the fact that individuals tend to relate to individuals in the novel. So, for instance, one character is a young man who becomes an unwilling soldier in the Civil War. He joins the Home Guard. He doesn't believe in the cause. He joins the Home Guard only because conscription is coming. He's going to be drafted, and he is told if he joins the Home Guard, he'll never leave the mountains. So he does that. But what he is in his heart is he's a musical prodigy. He's a banjo player. I mean, he plays all the instruments, but he's a banjo player. So often I have people who are musicians say, oh, I so related to Ben, or I so related to Elizabeth in this way, or I really loved that character Mary Lee because of ABC. So that's a real fun part of it, is that hopefully there's connection in one way or another.
And they see themselves in the characters. Yeah, I love
And
it.
they see themselves.
So for readers who may not have a personal connection to the region, is there an overall takeaway that you hope that when they read that, which binds us, that helps them understand Appalachia, or helps them understand people in the region and why they stay and why they are drawn to their home place?
Well, I certainly hope that someone who's not from the region and who's learning, getting a more insider view than perhaps they have had before, I hope that what they can see and feel is what the novel taught me, and that is we are all more alike than we are different. And if that's a lesson that someone else takes away, or a reminder, maybe not even a lesson, but if that's a reminder that somebody else takes from the book, it's certainly what the book and these characters taught me.
Yeah.
So I think that would be it.
Yeah, I love it. We've talked a lot about your writing and about your book, but you're also an artist. You have a studio. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your art as well and what that means to you, and how did you end up expressing your creative juices and talents in that way?
Well, I absolutely believe there's incredible value in living a creative life. That's how I think about it. And I think that it doesn't matter how you define that. And it can be defined in an infinite number of ways, whether it's cooking or gardening or sewing or quilting or woodworking or whatever it is. Just finding the joy that is inherent in you and having a way that you can express that to others. And it's in your own personal way. It's in a way that no other human being can ever do it but you, because it comes from you. I think that is, number one, a real gift to our world and a gift to our communities and a gift to our neighbors. But I think it's also such an important part of being human, and allowing yourself to blossom in that way, I think is just, it matters so much. I think about during COVID, when we were all in lockdown and the world was so scary in those early days when we didn't understand what was going on. The one thing that all through that period that kept me sane was I made things. Yeah. And anytime my hands were creating something, and I embroider and I knit and I paint and I do all the things, just hands-on something like that, something that is not digital for me anyway, really, really sustained me through that period. And, now that I say that out loud, it's very Appalachian. It's a very Appalachian. I think we are, we do things with our hands in Appalachia, and value it.
Yeah. And have that creative, like, from the earth and back to, it's from the earth and talk about gardening and painting and all those things as well.
And there's no such thing as a human being who is not creative. There are people who don't express their creativity, but it is in all of us. So that's the main thing. That's why I started painting, is just because one day I thought, well, let's just try this for a while, and it's brought me a lot of joy.
I love it. So you talked about going out to events and meeting your readers and things. So tell me about the people, other artists you encounter when you go out to like community events. And how do those experiences also keep you connected to Appalachia or connect you to other people who are also interested in sort of Appalachian arts and creativity?
Well, one thing about book tour that I didn't expect, but that has just been so wonderful is you do get to meet so many other authors.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in knowing this whole community from Heinemann, having a community that is so supportive, particularly when you're doing something as daunting as trying to get a novel published. There are so many no's. Having cheerleaders who are behind you and willing to hold your hands and cheer you on, and not only that, but pave the way for you is just something that's been really, really important. I'm very lucky in that early on I got to study with the Grand Dame, Lee Smith, who we all love and adore. And she took an interest in my work. Of course, she is just so generous and gracious in every way. But she was the person who said to me, Cathy, you need to get to Heinemann. You need to get to the Appalachian Writers Workshop because that's where your people are. And that has really been a wonderful thing for both for me and for my career as an author. So there's that. But then another example is I had a reading event, an author event at my hometown library in Wise at the Lonesome Pine Regional Library, where I had a job in high school. And that particular event was held in the Harris Gallery there. And Teresa Robinette, who is the artist who curates the exhibits that take place in that library, had an exhibit that was the work of women. And it was all artwork created by women of multiple generations and ages from right there in our community. So as you ask that question, I think about, oh my goodness, I got to sit in the library gallery in front of Phyllis Williams' magnificent quilt, surrounded by all this incredible art of Appalachian women, and talk about this book. I mean, wow.
Here's that theme again of that matriarchal line and the strength of Appalachian women. I love it. I love it.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, Cathy, our time flew by. I feel like I say that every single episode. I love these conversations, but we never let a guest get out without asking them this final question. So we draw back to the mission statement of Christian Appalachian Project, and that is building hope, transforming lives, and sharing Christ's love through service in Appalachia. When you think of those four words, hope, transformation, love, and service, which one do you think embodies the Appalachian spirit the most?
It's interesting because my first thought is all four of those are so significant in the story that I told. And so I'm thinking, was one more important than the others? And I guess because it's certainly true in the story that I told, and I think it's true of Appalachia, I think the answer has to be love, because from love begets all the others. It's always love.
I love it. Cathy, thank you so much. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It has just been a delight to be with you. Thanks so much.
Well, we'll definitely have to shout out Melissa Helton for all of the great Appalachian writers that she's recommended for the podcast and her own work as well. And so our guest today was Cathy Rigg, an Appalachian author, entrepreneur, artist, and storyteller. Thanks for listening. You know you can catch new episodes every Tuesday and invite your friends to listen to. For more information about Christian Appalachian Project and our work serving children, their families, and seniors across all 13 Appalachian states, you can visit our website at christianapp.org and find the show at christianapp.org/podcast or wherever you get your favorite podcast. If you like the show, be sure to follow, subscribe, and join us for next week's episode. This shows your support for the show, and it helps others to find us too. Until next time, this is The Mountain Spirit. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep lifting up Appalachian voices. We'll see you next week.